Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Deputy Thomas Chunn. I'm with the Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Office Community Engagement Team. Today we'll be doing an active shooter presentation. But to begin, I want to let you know that no one can tell you exactly how to survive an active shooter situation. We can only give you tips about if you do find yourself in a situation, some tips on how to hopefully survive that situation. If you're ever in a situation where someone tells you, or you have a presentation where someone is telling you that they know exactly how to survive an active shooter situation, just know that's a lie. Each active shooter situation is different and unique, and we learn from each one. All right, with that, we'll go on and begin our presentation. Just to give you a little setup about how the presentation goes, we'll begin with a definition of what an active shooter is. After that, we'll go over some incidents that have occurred, and we'll talk about those. And then to round out the discussion, we'll talk about different tips that we have to help you survive an active shooter situation. All right, to begin, let's start. What is an active shooter? Active shooter is an individual actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a confined and other populated area. In most cases, active shooters use firearms, and there's no pattern or method to their selection of victims. Active shooter situations are unpredictable, and they do evolve quickly. Now, you may have also heard of the term mass shooting. There's a difference between a mass shooting and an active shooting. Oftentimes, in the media, you may hear an event being called an active shooting event, and it really isn't as defined by the FBI. Just to give you an example, we talked about what an active shooter is. A mass shooting, that would be an incident where 4 or more people are injured, but the intent is different. An active shooter is, again, trying to kill as many people as possible in a short amount of time, and he usually doesn't know the victims. A mass shooting, for example, would be a situation where you might be out at a club or out at a restaurant, and someone has a disagreement in the parking lot. Someone starts shooting. They're intending to shoot 1 or 2 people, but they end up shooting 5 or 6 people unintentionally. That would be considered a mass shooting, not an active shooter, because the shooter intent was not to shoot the additional people that they end up shooting. So just whenever you see that in the news and you hear something being called an active shooting event, just be mindful there's a distinction between what an active shooting event or active shooter's intent is compared to what a mass shooting is and what that shooter's intent is. All right, these are some motivational factors behind an attack. These are 5 basic, they're not all encompassing, but 5 basic motivational factors behind an active shooter's attack. We'll go through these 5 and then we'll go back with some examples. All right, the first off would be a disgruntled employee. Second is domestic violence situation that spills over into the public. Evil intent. You have hate or various biases. And social exclusion. Going back to disgruntled employee, disgruntled employee's motivation usually is an issue at work. It can be with their coworkers or with management. To give you an example of a disgruntled employee attack that has occurred, one happened in Edmond, Oklahoma in August 20th, 1986. And that incident led to 14 people dying, 6 were wounded. During a deadly rampage at the Edmond post office that lasted less than 15 minutes, postal worker Patrick Sherrill pursued and shot 20 coworkers, killing 14 of them before committing suicide. Sherrill's attack actually inspired the American phrase of going postal. When it comes to domestic violence, an example of this would be an incident happened in Sutherland, Texas. It just happened in 2017, November 5th of 2017. It left 26 people dead, 20 wounded. This was when Devin Kelly, armed with a rifle, exited his vehicle and began shooting outside the First Baptist Church in Sutherland, Texas. He then entered the church and continued shooting at members of the congregation. The shooter exited the church and was confronted by a citizen who possessed a valid firearm. The citizen shot the shooter twice, causing the shooter to drop his rifle and flee the scene in his vehicle. The armed citizen, together with the owner of a passerby, pursued the shooter. The chase ended when the shooter's vehicle struck A road sign overturned. The shooter committed suicide with the handgun while in the truck before police arrived. In that particular incident, domestic violence situation, is actually 700 rounds were fired in 11 minutes. 700 rounds in 11 minutes. Going on to evil intent. Evil intent kind of encompasses those that we have no real idea of why they committed the crime. There was no motivation that detectives or investigators could find. So they fall into the evil intent, meaning they just wanted to kill people that particular day. One instance was in Nashville, Tennessee, April 22nd, 2008. It left 4 people dead and 4 people wounded. This is when Travis Rinkling, armed with a rifle, began shooting outside a Waffle House restaurant in Nashville. He fatally shot 2 people, and then continued shooting inside the restaurant when the shooter was finally confronted by a citizen who wrestled the gun away from him and tossed it over the counter. The shooter fled the scene, but he was later apprehended about 34 hours later at another location. Going into the motivational factor of hate. Hate can be race-based hate. It could be sexist hate. One particular incident happened in El Paso, Texas at the Walmart shooting that many of you may remember. Happened on August 3rd, 2019. Left 22 people dead, 24 wounded. You had Patrick Chrysius. He's armed with a rifle. Began shooting in a Walmart Supercenter parking lot and entered into the Walmart and opened fire on customers. The shooter drove off and was later apprehended by Texas Rangers. We'll also talk a little bit more about El Paso shooting later on in the presentation as well. The final motivation comes with social exclusion. In the slide, you can see we have a couple of examples of those that fall into that category. That would include the Virginia Tech shooter Sang Chow, Santa Barbara attacker Elliot Rogers, Columbine shooter Dylan Klebold, and former LAPD officer Christopher Donner. Another social exclusion, one of the earlier active shooting events actually happened in Keelan, Texas in 1991. This one was Mr. George Hennard. He drove his Ford Ranger pickup through the plate glass front window of Luby's Cafe. He exited his vehicle, yelled some expletives about the women of Keelan. And then he took his 2 handguns out and began shooting. He ended up killing 23. 14 of those 23 were women. Social exclusion usually falls under the category of people who have issues with females or with women. Usually they don't have relationships with women, or their failed relationships seem to lead them to have a negative disposition about the outlook of society. So they take out their frustrations by killing. The one exception of the people that we just spoke about is the LAPD officer Christopher Donner. He didn't have issues with females, but he did have issues with law enforcement in general. So his rampage really began with him going after law enforcement officers. With his story was that he was in a situation where he was with his partner. He believed his partner used excessive force. He reported it. He felt that he got backlash from his chain of command. After that, a couple of other things happened, or disciplinary actions happened. He was later let go by LAPD, and then he sought revenge by start his rampage by killing the daughter of his superior officer, then going out and targeting law enforcement after that. But he was later found deceased in the cabin once he got cornered. But these individuals usually have one specific segment of society that they have issues with, and when they feel detached from society, they lash out. All right, on to the next slide. All right, is how to prepare. Again, we can't tell you exactly how to survive an active shooter event, but we can give you some tips here. Active shooter situations are often over within 5 to 10 minutes before law enforcement even arrives to the scene. Individuals must be prepared both mentally and physically to deal with an active shooter situation. You want to be observant of your surroundings and report suspicious behavior. You also want to formulate a plan formulate a plan now while you're watching this presentation or during this presentation, so you have an idea of what to do if you find yourself in an active shooter situation. Again, going back, I want to emphasize that active shooter situations are over within 5 to 10 minutes before law enforcement even arrives. That's what makes this presentation so important. You're going to be your best chance of survival. We, law enforcement, won't be able to be there more than likely before to stop the active shooter before they've done some real damage. So hopefully these tips can help you survive that particular situation. All right, we'll move on to the next slide here. All right, these are practices for coping with an active shooter situation. You want to be aware of your environment and any possible dangers. You want to take note of the nearest exits in any facility you visit. If you are in an office, you want to stay there and secure the door. If you're in a hallway, get into a room and secure the door, if that's your best option. And as a last resort, you want to attempt to take the active shooter down when the shooter is at close range and you cannot flee. Your chance of survival is much greater if you try to incapacitate him or her. Again, if you find yourself, if you're in an office environment, you find yourself in your office, you don't have any windows, that would probably be a good place to hide. You want to take note of how your door opens. If you do find yourself in a room, does it open inward, where I can block the door with additional furniture, or does it open outward? In that case, you may have to use, depending on your door, have to use another type of device to keep that door secure, or that may just not be the best place for you to hide if you can't lock it and it opens outward. You may want to look for a better place to hide, or another a better option if hiding is in that particular area isn't the best choice at that time. You may want to just run. Again, if you're in a hallway and you're near a door or near an exit, use that door, use that exit, and get out. No need to run inside to a location if you can get yourself out of that situation altogether. All right, we'll move to the next slide. I'm going to talk real quick about what a soft target and a hard target is. A soft target is somewhere where it's easy access, normally no law enforcement presence. A hard target would be somewhere where there's a large amount of law enforcement. You consider like a soft target would be your regular stores, your retail stores, your Walmarts, Targets, Best Buys, anywhere like that. Your mall is really a soft target. A hard target would be something like a courthouse, a federal building, somewhere where there's a lot of large law enforcement presence that will make it more difficult for the active shooter to achieve his goals. All right, move to the next one. All right, we're going to go over some active shooter incidents. The first one we'll talk about here will be the Columbine High School shooting. Before we do that, I want you to go through a scenario here with me real quick. Imagine that the year is, let's say, 1995, and we're all on a plane. Someone comes in and says, "Hey, I have a bomb. I'm hijacking the plane." Now, in 1980, what would you have probably done? Most of us probably would say that we would have sat there and waited to see what the demands were for those particular individuals that said they had a bomb on the plane. Most of the time, planes would land somewhere, an airstrip. They would try to voice their demands. They may go to another airstrip. After that, after their plane was gassed up, oftentimes, wherever they were at later on in the situation, a SWAT team would normally go on board that plane, storm the plane, take out those terrorists, and be about their day. But now imagine if someone got on a plane today and said they had a bomb and they were taken on the plane, what would happen? The response more than likely changed. In 1995, you would have sat there waiting to see what was going to happen. Today, you probably would get up and attack that person. But what caused that change? What incident caused that change? That you're changing your thought process. So everybody would say September 11th. Change your mindset on if someone was going to take over a plane that you have to be on. That you're not just going to wait there and see what was going to happen, or if they were going to land a plane somewhere. because we know that the terrorist tactics are different now. They don't have a demand for anything. They're just looking to kill as many people as possible, just like an active shooter is. So that's where Columbine kind of comes into the picture here. Columbine was the event that changed the way that was the September 11th for active shooting. It changed the way both law enforcement reacts to active shooters, as well as how the general public should act and react to an active shooting event. Columbine happened on April 20th, 1999. 13 individuals were killed, 24 were injured. It was with Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. They killed 12 students and a teacher. They wounded 23 others before committing suicide. Now, I want to ask you another question. What do you think the response time was for law enforcement at Columbine? Well, the actual answer is it was approximately 4 minutes before the first officer was on scene. 4 minutes. Now, I want you to take a look at the frames or the pictures on your screen there. To the lower left-hand corner, you see there's a picture of the cafeteria of Columbine, and it's time-stamped at 11:24. Now, it was said that the first shots were fired approximately around 11:19, 11:20, and the first call to police was done around 11:22. Now, I want you to look at the right-hand side or the middle of your screen there. You have another picture of the Columbine cafeteria, which is also time-stamped. Now, that timestamp says 11:57. So, with the evidence we have on screen here, you can see that the shooting lasted from at least 11:24 to 11:57, which is an awful long time, given that law enforcement was on scene approximately 4 minutes after the shooting began. So what the idea was back then in Columbine, we thought that, as law enforcement, we thought that everyone that entered school and started shooting, they had to have a reason behind their shooting. So we have to wait for a specialized team, a SWAT team, or a CERT team to arrive on scene. We would have negotiators arrive on scene, negotiate with the shooters to see what it is that they wanted. Of course, now, after the shooting was concluded, we understand that they had no demands. There was nothing that they were looking to get out of the situation other than kill as many people as possible. So this is why now we now change our tactics as law enforcement. As far as active shooting events are concerned, we are direct the threat, meaning if someone is shooting, we're trying to find that shooter and put the shooter down. We're not helping anyone at that point in time as far as the injured. We're trying to stop people from being killed at that point in time. As far as the general public's change, how they should change in reacting to an active shooting situation, you can't wait for us. Oftentimes, if you can save yourself, that's the best thing to do. Save yourself, run, hide, or fight. That's what we suggest. If you find yourself in a situation like that and you have to fight, just do the best that you can to incapacitate or disable the shooter and survive that situation. We'll move on to the next slide. And this is another incident, a school incident here, a Virginia Tech shooting that happened in Blacksburg, Virginia. It was April 16, 2007. You had 32 people killed, 23 people injured. This gentleman actually locked the door. He chained the doors so people couldn't get out. He kind of went back and forth between classrooms. This was before we had active shooter drills, anything like that, where people would normally close the doors and try to barricade themselves in. He kind of went back and forth between the same classroom, shooting and killing many individuals. Next slide. It's the Las Vegas Strip shooting. Happened October 1st, 2017. This was the most deadly shooting we've had thus far as far as active shooting. It falls into the evil intent category because no one knows exactly what his purpose was behind doing the shooting. You had 52 people killed. You had over 422 people injured in this particular incident. In our next incident, on our next slide here, you had the Aurora Century 16 shooting, Aurora, Colorado, July 20th, 2012. You had 12 killed and 70 people injured in this event. or this incident. It really probably could have been a lot more people killed at this particular incident. Back when outside was open and we all was at movie theaters, think about where you would be sitting in a movie theater. This particular individual came in from the emergency exit, if you were facing the screen, to the bottom right of you. So if you got there early, you got a good seat, and you sat in the back, how would you escape that situation? Someone came in from the emergency exit, the bottom right of the movie theater. Maybe you duck down behind the seat, which is a possibility. Maybe you jump over or jump down the side there to escape the exits that way, down where the stairs are. Or maybe just hide behind those seats, like we said before. But there's also another way you can get out that many people don't think about, and that's the projector room. If you're sitting in the back and you're near that projector room and you can reach it, why not just jump up, pull yourself up through the projector room and escape that way? That way you don't have to go toward the shooter. That way you're not kind of a sitting duck behind those chairs. Because there is a picture in this slide that shows you the theater. It's too small to see, but they do have poles that are going through the seats showing the trajectory of the bullet. So if you did decide to get behind the seat, oftentimes the bullets will eat right through those seats. So if you need a moment just to collect yourself and figure out what your next plan of attack will be, or best plan for survival will be during a shooting, know that oftentimes a seat in a movie theater is not the greatest place to hide. You may have to move, get your wits about you for a second, and then find another place to be, or another path of escape. All right, we'll move to the next slide. All right, it's Fort Hood military base shooting. Fort Hood, Texas, November 5th, 2009. This is one of two shootings that have happened at Fort Hood. This one killed 13 and injured 30. Most oftentimes people probably think that a military base is a hard target. But if you're authorized to be on base and you get through the perimeter, it's really a soft target. The only people on the base with firearms are the MPs, military police. So if someone is authorized to be there and they begin shooting, it really becomes a soft target there. Another interesting fact about Fort Hood, other than having two shootings, the one that we talked about earlier in Keelan, Texas, is right by Fort Hood as well. So that area's had 3 active shooter situations in a pretty short period of time here. We'll move on to the next slide. All right, this was the church shooting that we had in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the Tree of Life Synagogue shooting. Happened October 27, 2018. Had 11 killed and 6 injured in this attack. What was really sad about this attack, that most people killed were elderly. You had a gentleman, he came in through the main floor. There was the top and bottom floor in this particular synagogue. There was services being held on the top and the bottom, 2 different services. He started shooting downstairs at that particular service. He worked his way upstairs to the another service that was going on. They had primarily elderly individuals in it, and it just wasn't possible for them to get out in time. Again, 11 killed and 6 injured in this incident. Move on to the next slide. All right, this is something close to home here. This is the UNCC school shooting happened in Charlotte, April 30th, 2019. You had 2 killed and 4 injured. And really, you could have had a lot more people killed if it wasn't for Mr. Riley Howell, who jumped into action, sacrificed his life to save the lives of his fellow students. It was an incident where there was a concert that was going to be held, so most of the law enforcement were off during a meeting at that point in time. They still were able to respond quickly, but due to the heroics of Mr. Riley Howell, he was able to save many lives that day. And I hate to say only 2 people were killed, but only 2 people were killed because it probably would have been a lot more if he had not acted. And he literally threw his body on the shooter Shooter dropped his weapon and gave up. So if you do find yourself in a situation, you think that's your best course of action, you don't have to do anything Jet Li style, anything crazy. Just doing something that simple to a cowardice person as putting your body in front of them and knocking them down and having them drop the weapon is enough resistance to get them to give up. Again, we salute Mr. Riley Howell. We'll move on to the next slide. All right, and this was the Walmart shooting that happened in El Paso, Texas. This was a race-based issue here where it was a hate crime or a hate-motivated crime. It's August 3rd, 2019. This gentleman killed 22 individuals, 26 were injured. Like all active shooters, he had planned and prepared for this particular incident, but he did not know where he wanted to do his shooting at. He only knew that he had a particular demographic, a Latino demographic that he wanted to go after. So after driving for a while, he got hungry. The only reason he stopped this Walmart was to get something to eat. He first entered inside and saw that was the demographic that he was intending on harming. Went back out to his vehicle, got his weaponry, began shooting in the parking lot, and worked his way inside of the Walmart. Again, he ended up killing 22 people, injured 26. But we've all been to Walmart at one point in time. So let's discuss what you would do at a Walmart. Probably what happened here, or what most of us would do, if we heard shooting in a Walmart, what would be the first place we would try to exit the store at? Probably the same place that we came in. So, where do you think the shooter was coming from? One of the two entrances of the store in the front. With that said, now that we're in the comfort of our own home or office, what would probably be other exits to Walmart? Have the garden section. You can go out the car section. Even though that door is locked, we can break that window and we can get out through the car section. The emergency exit, we can open the fire exit and get out that way. There's multiple exits in a Walmart. But most of the time, if you don't think these things through now, or think about what bad could happen, your instinct will lead you to go in or leave out from the place that you initially came in at, which would be the front, which means you're going toward the shooter. So just when you go into department stores or any place of business or restaurant, just be mindful of other exits in that facility and just have that in the back of your mind. It's not about being paranoid. It's more about being prepared of the what ifs. All right, we'll move to the next slide. There's another church shooting that happened here close to home. It's the Mother Emanuel AME church shooting, Charleston, another hate-based shooting. This happened on June 11, 2015. Had 9 killed and 1 injured in this shooting. Move on to the next slide. We also had the Pulse Nightclub shooting. Happened June 12, 2016. This was the worst active shooting that we've had up until the Las Vegas shooting that occurred shortly thereafter. This one had 49 people killed and 21 injured. If you remember anything about the setup of the club, when he entered in the club, there really was no where for anyone to go. It was kind of just a tough situation for everybody involved there. It was even tough for law enforcement to engage the individual once they arrived on scene. Like we talked about earlier, we don't normally sit and wait and sit back and negotiate with someone. But in this particular case, there was no good route for law enforcement to engage this individual. It was so bad, in fact, that they had to later on end up breaking through with a Bearcat through the back wall of the club to gain access to actually engage the suspect. So you can imagine what the patrons had to go through, knowing there was really nowhere where to run. So be mindful when you go to clubs, even here in Charlotte. If you go to a particular club, just be mindful of the exits and the setup of the club and where you may where you may sit at or where you may spend most of your time at. Just be aware of the other exits that you can get out in case something were to happen. We'll move on to the next slide. All right, these are some additional active shooter incidents. We already talked about Louis Massacre, the Keelan, Texas shooting. You also had Sandy Hook Elementary shooting with all the children. 27 killed, 2 injured in that one. It was the San Bernardino shooting. You had 14 killed, 21 injured. That was a tag team shooting where you had multiple active shooters. I had the Marjorie Stone high school shooting in Florida. Had 17 killed, 17 injured, or Parkland shooting. Santa Fe high school shooting had 10 killed, 13 injured. Thousand Oaks, we talked about Virginia Tech shooting, but the Virginia Beach shooting was 12 killed, 4 injured. That was a workplace-related shooting. You had the Dayton, Ohio shooting that killed 9 and injured 27. He killed those 9 in a very short period of time. It was seconds. Seconds he killed 9 people, and seconds he was killed by law enforcement who happened to be on scene. So these things do happen very quickly. You have to be able to react. We'll move to the next slide. All right, this was a Minnesota clinic shooting that we had recently here, February 9th, 2021. They had 1 killed, 4 injured. The shooter was apprehended. And this was the latest school shooting, active shooting that we've had. The Saugus High School shooting, Santa Clarita, California. See, this happened November 14, 2019. I mean, we went all of 2020 without a school shooting, something we haven't done in decades. So with COVID happening and school being out, it put a stop to that trend that was happening. But just be prepared when school reopens in the fall. If we have the pandemic is under control, there probably will be a rash. Don't be surprised if there's a rash of school shootings at that point in time. Just be mindful and be prepared. We'll move on to the next slide. All right. You see the gentleman in the far left right there. I know many people have probably heard of the name Jack Ryan from the show. That's on Amazon Prime. He was a hero on that show. This gentleman right here, his name is Jack Wilson. He's a real-life superhero. This gentleman is a firearms instructor. Also head of security at his church in Whitefield Settlement, Texas. We're going to show a video here that's going to show you an active shooting. Most of everything is blurred out, but you may hear the actual gunshots that occurred. You can do your best to see the reaction. Well, we'll talk about the reaction of the congregation after the video. Just be mindful and take a look at that, and be mindful of everyone's movements. Just to set it up for you, this individual was known to the security team. He had been there before, but he was acting awkward this particular day. Of course, he wore a long coat in Texas. Yes, it's winter time, but it's Texas, so that was out of the norm. And he sat in the back of the church. So light bulbs went off for everyone on the security team. They actually had off screen, which you won't be able to see in the video. You have a number of security personnel back there. You had one particular individual, Mr. Richard White, who lost his life during this incident, who put himself right behind the shooter because they were suspicious of him. Mr. Richard White was armed, but he just was not unable to get his firearm out of the holster in time before he was shot. There's also Mr. Anton Wallace. He was a elder of the church, or a deacon of the church. He had just finished giving out communion at the time. The gentleman came up to him the first time, said something to him, went back to his seat. Shortly thereafter, he returned, said something else to Mr. Wallace. He produced a weapon and shot Mr. Wallace. As soon as he shot Mr. Wallace, Mr. White, the security person, stood up, tried to draw his weapon, and then he was subsequently shot by the offender. Then almost immediately thereafter, Mr. Wilson, Jack Wilson, shot.
and took the offender down. So he had 2 or 3 total lost their life, including the shooter, and 2 victims in this particular case. We'll roll this video and we'll talk a little bit more about it at the end here.
Inside a church in White Settlement, a group of people gathered to peacefully worship. One man with a weapon ruined that peace and many lives of members of our North Texas community. As this happened, the Sunday service was streamed live online as usual, and that video is as gut-wrenching as you can imagine. We want to be as transparent as possible here and tell you that after a lot of conversation, we decided to show you some of it with the goal of giving you a sense of how things played out inside this worship space. Now, this video is blurred. You will hear 3 gunshots, but will not see the shooting itself or hear the sounds that come after. It is upsetting and difficult to watch. These are our friends and our neighbors, and we want to be respectful to the horror that they lived through and to who we lost. We also know that what this video shows will be central to the investigation into why and how this happened and what went right to keep people safe. On Sunday morning's live stream, the congregation inside West Freeway Church of Christ was passing around communion. At the top of your screen, near the center, you see a man dressed in black who's been sitting in this service, stand to take the symbolized body and blood of Christ. He returns to his seat briefly before coming back out of the pew to speak to the man who just gave him communion. We are freezing the video here, just before that suspect pulls out a rifle and fires. We want to warn you, the sound of the gunshots is jarring. A church security guard responds, and we see the shooter fall to the ground as a stunned congregation ducks and covers. It all happens in 6 harrowing seconds. What follows is chaos and grief as the church team works to get help to those hit and move the rest of the faithful to safety. In the minutes that follow, a church leader takes to the mic and tells that congregation that everything is under control and that the security team did exactly what they needed to do. He then methodically evacuates each section of that church into a separate room as first responders enter to help those hurt.
All right. Those of us who have ever shot a firearm realize that that shot that Mr. Wilson took was extremely rare and difficult to do. It's just not like on TV where someone can just pull a gun in a high and sensitive situation and hit their target from that type of distance. But he was able to do it in one shot and put that individual down. That was really remarkable. What you didn't see in the video is after this shooting, after that 3rd shot, which all this unfolded in 6 seconds, there were other congregants in the congregation. There were also CCW holders. And you can see many people start to pull out their weapons as well. So if he was just so happened to miss, I think he still would have been stopped before causing quite a bit of damage. Again, you have security personnel with their weapons as well as just parishioners with their weapons on as well. All right. On the next side here, we have a Colorado grocery store shooting, Boulder, Colorado. This happened on March 22nd, 2021. He had 10 killed, 0 injured. I usually reserve this slide for the most recent, but then we had one yesterday that happened. I believe it was offhand. I believe it was Georgia. Another one happened, or California. I'm sorry. It happened in California. They're coming in rapid succession now that we're starting to open back up. So again, this is something that everyone needs to be mindful of. That is a tick up in active shooter situations. So this course or this presentation hopefully will help you survive if you find yourself in one of these situations, which seem to be happening on an almost daily basis now. All right, we'll move on to the next slide. Let's see. This part of the presentation will act what you should do. What you should do if you were to encounter an active shooter. We're going to go over a short video here, and we'll teach you just the basics about run, hide, and fight. That's what we follow here. After we go over that short video here,
We'll break down each segment, the run segment, the hide section, and the fight section, and we'll go in a little more in depth into what we can do or what to look out for using each one of these techniques. We'll move on to the next slide and watch the video. Also be mindful when you watch this video, take a look at each individual and how they react to the active shooter, and think about what you may do different if you find yourself in this situation.
Active shooter events can occur anywhere at any time, and frequently involve individuals attempting to kill others indiscriminately. These events are unpredictable and can evolve quickly. For this reason, whenever you enter a building as an employee, guest, or customer, you must be prepared and know what it is you will do if faced with the worst case scenario, even if it's just another day at the office.
Last night, every time I closed my eyes, all I could see were slide decks.
Don't remind me. Sorry I'm late. Did I miss anything?
Hey, you got a minute to catch me up on that thing?
Yeah, come on in. Is Amelia here too?
Let me grab her, okay?
Yeah, thank you.
When startled by a gunshot, it's a natural human reaction to freeze. Unfortunately, this response leaves you vulnerable to what might come next. If you see someone frozen in place in this type of situation, make your best attempt to assist them.
I think it's critical that we find a way to make sure this doesn't happen again. We've wasted way too much time.
That's gunfire.
Are you sure that was a gunshot?
That's gunfire.
Is that really a gunshot? Call the police.
If you can't easily evacuate, the best option is to hide. Lock the door, stay close to the ground, and try to find cover from any stray gunfire that may penetrate the walls. If you're able, call 911.
What was that?
Sounded like a gunshot. What should we do?
Come on, let's get out of here.
When possible, the best alternative in an active shooter event is to run. If your path is clear and you can safely reach an exit, evacuate as soon as possible. Of course, some may not have such easy access to a safe exit. In these situations, you must decide for yourself whether it is best to evacuate or to hide. As with any of these options, if you do choose to run, commit to this action. And remember, police will be arriving to assist you and to evacuate the wounded, so be sure to keep your hands up and empty as you clear the building. Otherwise, put simply, don't stop running. Once clear of danger, make contact with 911 to assist their response by providing them information about the shooter, the weapons they're carrying, and the amount of wounded that may still need medical assistance. If you have been unable to evacuate and are trapped in the facility during an active shooter situation, remember, making the decision to hide does not prevent you from putting up a fight later. If you are confronted by the active shooter, you have to assume that your actions are all that stand between yourself, your colleagues, and grave harm. fight for your life. Search around you for sharp or heavy objects that you may use to disable the attacker. Collaborate with those around you to ensure you aren't acting alone. You're taking action for your survival, so do not hold back, and do not stop fighting until you know beyond certainty that you are safe.
Committing to run, to hide, or to fight will keep you safer than if you freeze during a crisis. Remember to prioritize your safety. If you come across those who are wounded and may need assistance, assist them if you can, but do not let them inhibit your escape.
As an individual, the most important thing you can do to keep yourself safe, whether it is to run, hide, or to fight, is to commit to your decision and to continuously reevaluate the situation. If you own a business or operate a large public facility, you may be able to better enable individual response to such events by identifying emergency escape routes and exits. Use this information to design evacuation plans that can be used by employees and guests to your facility. Reach out to law enforcement to see if they'll come to your facility and assist you in drafting your response plan or guide you to training that may assist employees in their survival. Remember, this training may be the difference between life or death. See about technology you may be able to incorporate to make your facility safer, which may include audio or visual cues for those with access and functional needs. Plan for and train your employees to assist those who may not be able to run, hide, or fight. Equip them with a first aid or a go kit, an emergency ladder in case you're not on the first story, and explore the possibility of mass notification technologies, which may enable you to alert those in the area of any present dangers. Of course, the hope is that neither you nor any of your friends or colleagues will ever be confronted with an active shooter situation. However, should the worst case occur, know that you can always run, hide, or fight. For more information and resources in active shooter preparedness and response, please visit dhs.gov/active-shooter-preparedness, including DHS's new Active Shooter Preparedness Virtual Learning Center, a feature-length video sponsored by the Department of Homeland Security that can teach you how to mitigate, respond to, and better react if confronted with an active shooter event.
All right, let's just start talking about run. If you decide to run, you want to run out the building far away until you're in a safe location. Oftentimes in presentations, people may ask, well, how far do I need to run? As far as you need to run is whenever you feel safe. If you need to run all the way home, that's fine. As long as you're alive, you're good to go. You're going to trust your instinct. And whenever you're in a situation and you decide to run, instincts are telling you to go one way, go ahead and take that way. We got instinct for a reason. We need to use them during situations like that. You want to visualize your escape routes beforehand. Again, you want to think about, as we talked about with the Walmart or any other place that you may find yourself at, think about exits, think about routes that you can escape, ways that you can get out, different ways that you can get out. You won't want to think like everyone else. You want to think differently. You may want to go out the back through the stocking area. Wherever you need to go. And whatever you need to do to survive the situation, you need to do it. You also want to leave personal belongings behind. It's on this presentation for a reason. People have been seen going back to get their personal items, their phone or laptop or whatever. Just leave that stuff where it is. Your life is way more valuable than your things. All right, we'll move on to the next slide. All right. And you can also hide. Now, if you're running is not a safe option, hide in a safe place as possible. You want to find a location that provides the most protection. You want to talk about cover and concealment as well here. When we talk about finding a location that provides the most protection, when we go back and we talked about the movie theater and how those seats were just a temporary place to be because they concealed you. But they did not provide cover because the bullets went right straight through those seats. So that's the difference between your concealment and your cover. Your cover is something that's going to stop a bullet or slow down a bullet. A concealment is just going to hide you from the line of sight of the shooter. So you want to get cover first. Reevaluate while you're there. Is this the best place for me to be at this point in time? Am I safe here?
Do I feel as safe as possible here, given the situation? Evaluate minute to minute, second to second. What do I need to do next? Do I need to move anywhere else? Or do I need to just stay here? Am I safe where I'm at? You want to avoid places that trap or restrict movement. That's more talking about closets. You pretty much don't want to find yourself in a closet unless that's your only or your best chance to survive at that point in time. But just know, if the shooter comes and open up that closet door, you kind of lowered all your options at that point in time. You've removed all your options. You only have one option at that point in time. You have to fight for your life. You want to spread out. If you are in the room, you want to spread out. You won't want to huddle in one corner of the room altogether. This gives options for escape and movement and makes you a harder target. So if a person or a shooter was able to get in the room that you're occupying and you had multiple individuals in there, you all don't want to be in one corner. Everyone should be spread out in different corners of the room. So if the shooter just so happened to be able to get in to that room, they have to make a decision. And it takes time for them to make that decision. And it gives them time to make a mistake. So once they come in the room, now they got to decide who do I want to shoot first? And that gives you a second to think about, okay, do I need to run this situation? Am I close enough to fight the individual? But most importantly, you just don't want to stay there. If they point the gun in one direction, you have to make a decision right then and there. Do I need to run away from the shooter? Do I need to run toward him and fight the shooter? You have to make a decision right then and there. Just don't wait in your corner, because the shooter is going to turn around and start shooting at your corner as well. All right, we'll move on to the next slide. All right. Also, with hiding, you want to make sure if you're in a room that you're in a door in a room where the door does lock. If the door doesn't lock, and it opens inward, you want to be sure to put as much furniture as possible in the way to give the shooter as much resistance as possible. We talked about a little bit earlier, these shooters are cowards. So if you give them a little bit of resistance, they're going to go the other way. But just like water, they're going to go to the path of least resistance every time. So if you find yourself in a room and the door opens inward, put as much furniture in front of that door as possible. In the video, when the shots first began, we saw that the young lady put the door stopper by the door, which is good, but you also had that desk, the full desk you could put in front of that door, as well as a small desk in front of that door, and just barricade it. A person, unless it's a domestic violence situation and they're just killing people to get to the person they're trying to get to, they're not going to sit there and waste time trying to open the door or push through some furniture just to shoot into a room. They're not going to do that. Again, you also want to close and lock your windows and close the blinds or cover windows. You want to turn off your lights. You want to be as quiet as possible. Don't attract the shooter towards you. If you're the one person in the room that remembers to silence their phone, let everyone else know. Say, hey, let's all put our phones on silent. But don't turn your phone off. Leave your phone on. Post what's happening on social media. Not necessarily what's happening in the room, but you want to post information. Law enforcement should be monitoring social media to see, all right, what's happening. Get as much information as possible. Do not cut off your phone. Make sure it's on and get as much information out as possible that you can at that point in time through social media. Use that as a weapon to your advantage. You want to remain silent as possible. I know it's a stressful situation, but you want to be as quiet as possible. And you want to remain in place until given an all clear by identifiable law enforcement. If you're not sure law enforcement is at the door and you're inside the room barricaded, you have all the time in the world. There's no rush. Many times we've seen in campus shootings where it may not have actually been a shooting, but the reaction of students were to get out of the room where they were already safe at. Getting out of that room probably puts you in more peril than if you were to just stay in that room if you have it barricaded already. And there's no windows. You're in about as safe a place as possible. Again, that shooter's not going to waste time trying to jiggle that door, try to bust through that door, to shoot into that room. All right. So if it is identified for law enforcement, we will find a way to make sure that we can identify we are who we say we are. But you have all the time in the world. If you're not comfortable, do not rush it. We'll move on to the next slide here. All right. Now, if neither running nor hiding is a safe option, as a last resort, when confronted by a shooter, adults in immediate danger should consider trying to disrupt or incapacitate the shooter by using aggressive force and items in their environment such as fire extinguishers, chairs, etc., whatever you have at your disposal. Just about anything that you can find in the room can be used as a weapon. You can use your phone as a weapon, your purse as a weapon, your computer, your laptop, your mouse, cords, anything can be a weapon. The blinds could be a weapon. Anything that you can take off and swing at somebody with or throw at somebody can be used as a weapon. As you see in this picture, you have a number of individuals that have weapons in their hands. One guy has a bowl. One young lady has a coffee pot. Of course, hot coffee is a great weapon. Another gentleman in a yellow shirt has a chair. Great weapon. We all have chairs where we're at. You also had a fire extinguisher. Fire extinguisher probably should be in any building that you enter into. So you always know there's a weapon available somewhere within that building. You can use it as a blunt force object, or you can use the spray to distract the shooter. Whatever you need to do to use that in that particular situation, then you need to use it. We'll move on to the next slide. And when you're fighting, you want to make a plan and act as a team. Meaning, if someone comes in the room and they're shooting, and Joe, my partner Joe, is in the room, and he jumps on this particular individual, it probably would behoove me if I were to jump on them too. Now, we can't tell you exactly what to do in a situation, but it probably would be in my best interest. If it's one-on-one fighting, I don't want to sit there and wait and see who wins. We want to change the odds, and we want to put the odds in our corner. So if we have 2, 3, 4, 5 people on top of this active shooter, it's probably be best for us to disarm the individual, get him down, and save our own lives at that point in time. So you want to commit completely to your action, meaning if you do want to fight, you want to fight all the way. You don't want to halfway kind of go about it, fighting this individual. If you decide to attack the individual, attack that individual. If you decide to run and you don't want to have any parts to do with the fight, then you need to run. You don't want to stop and see who's going to win. You want to get out of that situation altogether. Do whatever's necessary to neutralize the situation. When you find yourself in a situation where it's life or death for you and the active shooter, do whatever's necessary to survive that situation. That is your goal. We'll move to the next slide. All right, I'm not going to read this entire thing. This is General Statute 14-41.3. This is use of force in defense of person, relief from criminal and civil liability. This tells you as a citizen what you can do to protect yourself. At your leisure, you can go and look up this general statute and read the details of it. Again, this tells you what you can do as a general citizen to defend yourself. Law enforcement has a different standard. This is your standard as a civilian, what you can do to defend yourself. Move on to the next slide. Again, that's General Statute 14-51.3 that you can read at your leisure. All right, and this is law enforcement response to an active shooter. Again, we talked about earlier, Columbine, that incident now changes the way law enforcement and civilians or the general public reacts to an active shooter situation. Now, if deputies or officers are trained to proceed as quickly as possible to the sound of gunfire, their purpose is to stop the shooter. Sheriff, police may be in plainclothes patrol uniforms or SWAT uniforms, armed with long rifles, shotguns, and or handguns. They will have identification, or they may not. And you do not stop to ask officers to help or directions even when evacuating. You just want to go in the direction from which officers are entering the premise. That will be your safest route. If possible, tell the officers where the shooter was last seen and provide a full description of the shooter and any weapons used. The first responding police officers or sheriff deputies will not stop to assist injured people. Others will follow to treat the injured. Say that to say this. If there is an active shooter going on, law enforcement first arrives on the scene, talked about earlier, to direct the threat. So we're going directly to that person that's shooting. Even if you're injured,
law enforcement would probably walk by you and not assist you at that point in time. The main objective is to stop other people from being killed or dying. Also, whatever you see at that point in time with the shooter, if you got a glimpse of the shooter, as you're running out the door, as you're running where the officers came in, yell that information out to them. You don't have to stop, just yell it out. Yell, I saw green shirt, red pants, red shirt, blue pants, blue jeans, long rifle, handgun, whatever you thought you saw. Black male, white male, Asian male, Latino male, whatever you saw, female, whatever you saw, just yell that out. I can guarantee you on scene or on the way to scene, to be on scene, law enforcement is going to have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 different descriptions of what that shooter is. So the more information that we can gather, the better we can decipher through it at that point in time, and the better we can react to the situation. So if you're unsure, that's okay. If you're unsure, still yell out what you saw, what you think, and let us filter through that information, and so we can be better prepared for the situation that we're going into. Move on to the next slide. All right, this is how you should react when help arrives. You want to remain calm and follow officers' instructions the best that you can. It is a high-stress situation. You want to avoid pointing, screaming, and or yelling. Again, the best that you can. Immediately raise your hands and spread your fingers, which is very important. Again, we just talked about leave 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 different descriptions of what the shooter looks like. At this point, when we go into a situation, we're probably going to think anybody could be the shooter. So if your hands are visible, that puts everyone at ease. You want to avoid making quick movements toward officers, such as attempt to hold on them for safety. Again, if you do attempt to do that, they're probably going to just push you off because, again, they're just trying to stop other people from being killed. So their objective is to get to the shooter and stop the shooter as soon as possible. Move on to this next slide. All right, these are some key considerations of an active shooter. I won't go through each one of these. I'm just going to hit on some key points here. There is no one demographic profile for an active shooter, meaning there have been men active shooters, there have been women active shooters. They've come in all backgrounds, all demographics, all income levels. There's no particular active shooter per se. Now, many active shooters display observable pre-attack behaviors, which, if recognized, can lead to disruption of a planned attack. So we all probably have in work environments where you're probably around someone where you're kind of questioning that could be the active shooter. Because what do we see usually after an active shooting? Most people get on the news and they'll say, oh, well, he had this person was off, or she was off, or he was off, or we thought there was something strange about this person. And most of the time, no one ever reports that. So if you're at work, you want to probably go through HR, see what those necessary steps are to report someone that you may believe may have an issue at work and may take that out on other individuals at work. All right, in your community, if you see someone that may suspect, just report it to the officials. It's okay, the police or sheriff office. Report it to us. Will something be done immediately? Probably not, but if we have them on the radar, it gives us a better shot at stopping it. Also, concerning active shooters, a person who makes a threat is rarely the same as the person who poses a threat. And successful threat management of a person of concern often involves long-term caretaking, coordinating between law enforcement, mental health care, and social services. All three of those services are usually underfunded and overburdened. So again, it's still important for you to go ahead and report that to officials and put that in the system. And hopefully things will line up to where we can head off an active shooter, because it is possible to be done. Don't be discouraged by the slow pace that it may happen. But as long as we can get some information and put them on the radar, we have a better chance of stopping them. We'll move on to the next slide. All right, assisting individuals with special needs and or disabilities. This is something that's very important. In the White Settlement shooting video, what you did not see on screen, there were two individuals in the church. Both were in wheelchairs. When the shooting began, One lady was able to get out of her wheelchair and get down and duck down. The other individual was not. So if you have a loved one who is disabled or a loved one who's elderly, and you find yourself in a place of worship or out shopping, anywhere that you might be a restaurant, have a plan for them. Have a plan for them. What are we going to do if an active shooter situation happens or occurs? What do you want me to do as your caretaker? What do you want me to do? What are you going to do? It just all depends on that conversation, what your next step should be if you find yourself in that situation. And it's a difficult conversation. It's a morbid conversation to talk about it, but it is important. It's kind of like talking about life insurance. You don't want to talk about it, but it's highly necessary. It's a highly necessary conversation to be had. So all parties have a sound mind after a situation were to occur. You don't want to be in a situation where you ran off and now your loved one is injured or hurt, and that's not what they want you to do. So just have a conversation with a disabled individual. If you're a caretaker, a loved one, what are we going to do in an active shooter situation? Ensure that the emergency action plans, evacuation instruction, and any other relevant information addresses individuals with special needs and disabilities. And your building, if you're in a building, should be handicap accessible and in compliance with ADA requirements. We'll move to the next slide. Also, medical care for the wounded during an active shooter event is very important. A good portion of deaths in active shooter events can be attributed to blood loss from wounds, meaning most people bleed out. Most people aren't just shot and they die immediately. Most individuals who die in active shooting events, they are shot and they just bleed out over time because, like we talked about earlier, it takes time to get help to them. Officers that arrive on scene won't necessarily be the first people to provide aid. They have to secure the scene first. So if you find yourself in a situation where a loved one is injured, you will be that person on site to provide that first level of care to stop the bleeding. I encourage you to go do some basic first aid courses. Go seek help through the Red Cross online. Any information that you can gather to learn basic survival skills or first aid skills in a situation like that will be helpful. There are kits, relatively inexpensive, available that can go over top of gunshot wounds to stop the bleeding. Again, the website's on the slide there. And it's also Red Cross here has a Control the Bleed program that can give you basic first aid on how to stop bleeding in a traumatic situation. We'll move on to the next slide. All right, in summary, you want to be proactive and be ready at all times. It's not about being paranoid. It's about being prepared. You want to remember to constantly be aware of your surroundings. Active shooter incidents are unpredictable, and they do evolve quickly, but they are survivable. You want to run, hide, and fight, and not necessarily in that order. Whatever order that you need to put that in to survive is the correct order. And have a plan for best chance of survival. Again, after this presentation, think about it a little bit. Think about the what ifs. Next time you go to the store, think about the what ifs. If you put that in your brain now, you'll instinctually adapt to that if something were to happen, where you won't have to even think about it. Your body will automatically react. All right, next slide. All right, in closing, this is a message from our sheriff, Sheriff McFadden. I want to thank you for allowing the women and men of the Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Office to serve you. A deep sense of service and commitment to excellence is exactly what the Sheriff's Office intends to bring to the community in which we live and work. It's my absolute honor and privilege to serve as your sheriff. My office seeks to listen and spark meaningful conversations in hopes of purposely engaging those that we serve to establish trust and confidence in your sheriff's office. Hopefully this presentation was enlightening and was helpful. More than likely, you will never have to use these skills because active shooter events are infrequent. But if you do find yourself in a situation, you now are a little bit better prepared to adapt to it. Now, if you find yourself in a mass shooting situation, which is more likely, you can still use these same
run, hide, fight techniques to survive that situation as well. We will take some time now, if you have any questions, to throw them in the chat, and we can answer those as well. All right. If there's no questions, that concludes our active shooter presentation. We thank you all for joining us. We appreciate your time and your attention, and we look forward to you joining us in our other presentations here in the future. Always look at us on social media for what we're doing next and for our next presentations. Thank you very much for your attention, and have a wonderful evening.